Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. It is Friday. We'll be doing Dan and Kyle in the morning, talking about each and every game for this weekend. But first, as we always do, let's start off by talking to Dr. David Chao. You can find him over on Twitter at ProFootballDoc and at ProFootballDoc.com. Doc, thanks for squeezing me in. I know you got a flight in a bit, so I appreciate you making the time.
All good. Always happy to chat with you.
All right, let's start off here with, let's go to Chris Godwin. I'm not sure, you may know by the time you listen to this whether or not he is actually going to be active right now. He's fractured his finger. The reports are apparently that originally it was thought to be possibly 4 to 6 weeks, but then they thought there's optimism he can even play this week. I assume he'll have to have some sort of splint or cast. So do you expect him to play? And when he does play, can he be effective considering he'll need to wear some sort of splint or cast?
I do expect him to play. And yes, he'll have some sort of splint on where he's buddy taped to the middle finger. And with the surgery, it actually stabilizes the fracture. And if he needs, he can always, believe it or not, get a little numbing medicine into the finger where the jarring of the ball won't affect him. So, his legs are great, and that's how you get open in this league. And I think he's going to be able to play and going to be able to be active for the Bucks.
All right, good news for fantasy managers. How about Ezekiel Elliott here? I didn't even realize, but apparently he might have tweaked his hamstring in the last game against Philadelphia. He's been missing in and out of practice, limited to practice, and apparently they're going to evaluate him on Sunday. Do you have any insight into Zeke's hamstring at all?
Look, there's no video and so forth, but I have some nervousness here. First of all, hamstrings are unpredictable. Second of all, how often do you hear a coach being pessimistic? They're almost always optimistic, right? And Mike McCarthy is saying, yeah, Thursday wasn't as good. We're not sure where he's going to end up here. We'll see. We think he's going to play. I mean, that's pretty negative to me. So if I had Zeke Elliott, I would be looking at other options to be prepared.
All right, how about Chris Carson? Now he's battling a foot injury. He was deemed week to week. He hasn't really practiced much this week, but then there's some apparent optimism here. Do you think that he's going to be able to suit? I mean, it's Pete Carroll. There's always optimism.
That's why I was chuckling.
Do you expect him to be able to play? And if so, do you think he's going to be okay to get essentially a full workload?
Well, last week, Pete Carroll was saying, game time decision, I think he might go. And, the usual Pete Carroll. And I think even we talked about Chris Carson's not going. And it was going to be DeeJay Dallas greater than Travis Homer, greater than Chris Carson, greater than Carlos Hyde.
Right.
That pattern has not changed. Hyde is not playing. I don't believe Chris Carson is playing. I believe Homer will play and get more time than he did last week. And it's still DeeJay Dallas, number one. The split might be, 2/3, 1/3. Is it 50-50? I don't know. But I would not count on Chris Carson again this week. I think it's a little bit of a long shot to play and or be effective.
All right, how about Calvin Ridley here? He's got the foot/ankle, whatever you want to call it. He hasn't really been practicing. There was also an optimistic report about him recently, but they have the bye next week. Do you expect the Falcons to be cautious and hold him out here?
I mean, you could wait till the 90-minute inactives, but I don't believe he will play. He might even get ruled out on Friday, the Friday injury report. And I think that it's a midfoot sprain. Yes, it's mild. They're going to take advantage of the bye. So between the game and after the bye, it's going to be 2.5 weeks of rest. He'll be back after the bye, but I would not count on him this week.
How about Kenyan Drake? They had the bye last week, so he had a little extra time to recover from his ankle injury. It's certainly not looking good, and they didn't expect him necessarily to play this week. But how long do you expect him to miss with this ankle injury?
I mean, I don't know that he's close yet. I don't think he's in play for this week. I mean, hope would be to have a shot for next week. That would be the earliest, I think, given his high ankle sprain that he had. And we did see some all-22 video that showed the high ankle sprain.
How about Kenny Golladay? We know he's already out this week. He's been deemed week to week with the hip injury. Any idea on the severity of this one?
Non-contact, don't know the severity, but we knew that he was going to be out this week. Going to need some more information before we could put a timeline on when he's going to return. The good news is he hasn't been put on injured reserve yet. So either the Lions have the roster room or they don't think it's going to be 3 weeks or more.
All right, let's finish up here with George Kittle. He's got a foot fracture. There's talk that he could miss the entire season. Fantasy managers have been asking me all the time, do I drop him? Do I stash him? Is there any chance that he's going to come back and play towards the end of the year? So what do you think about Kittle's possibility of returning later in the season?
Well, Dan, you always know I say I'm an injury expert, not a fantasy expert. And for me to answer the question of what to do with him, depends on your scoring, depends on your league, depends on when your playoffs are, and depends on your lineup and your other options, obviously. But from a medical perspective, I thought it was really good news. And I wrote about this and posted it at profootballdoc.com, wrote about it at Outkick, where I said, his season is not over. Initially, they said 8 weeks, meaning his season is over. I would take the under on the 8 weeks. It is not a fifth metatarsal fracture where you might need surgery. It is a cuboid fracture, also on the outside of the foot. It's a cube-like bone, and they couldn't even see it on X-ray. They had to get a CT scan to see it. That metaphyseal bone, cancellous bone, heals very well and very quickly. George Kittle says he'll be back in 2 weeks. That's George Kittle. He's not going to be back in 2 weeks.
Right.
But I also don't think it's going to be 8. I think 6 is very reasonable. Could it be 5 and maybe 4? If they're lucky, maybe. So where does that put you? I mean, if you could wait 6 weeks, you should hang on to George Kittle. If you can't, of course, you should just make your decision.
And my guess is fantasy managers are probably going to be rooting for the 49ers to put up a little bit of a better showing than they did last night so that they at least stay on the outskirts of the playoff picture and will have more motivation. We will talk to you next week, and we'll get ready to go over to Dan and Kyle in the morning where we'll talk about each game on the weekend slate. Clap. All right, guys, now let's bring in Yates for Dan and Kyle in the morning. What's up, Yates?
Not much, man. Just enjoying a nice Friday morning here. I've got my second cup of coffee, and I'm ready to talk some football.
I mean, I have done my errands for the day. I've got an IG chat coming up. I'm just pumped for this. I wasn't on the Wednesday show, so I've not yet gotten a chance to really talk through my rankings. So I'm ready to go. You know the drill here. We're going to be talking about each and every game on this weekend's slate. But first, reminder about our giveaway for November. It is a signed Alvin Kamara helmet. You can enter our contest in one of 3 ways. Follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Pros. Follow us on Instagram at Fantasy Pros. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Fantasy Pros. If you do any of those, it is an entry. If you do all of those, it is 3 entries. And you can submit your entries on fantasypros.com/contest. That's all it is, fantasypros.com/contest. Really easy to enter, and that's going to run through November. All right, Yates, as we always do here on our Friday, let us start with the accuracy challenge. A reminder, you can enter this at fantasypros.com/challenge. Free to enter, just 10 different players with fantasy points over unders. Sponsored by BetMGM. Grand prize for the free contest is a 3-day, 2-night stay at an MGM resort property in Las Vegas, and it includes round-trip airfare. Are you ready, Kyle Yates?
Let's go.
Tom Brady against New Orleans, exactly 20 fantasy points over under.
I'm going over here. This is actually a really, really good matchup. Even though we have this perception about the New Orleans Saints as being a stout defense, they are the 5th easiest matchup for opposing fantasy quarterbacks, the 9th easiest matchup for opposing wide receivers, and the 4th easiest for opposing tight ends. So you look at the strengths of the Buccaneers offense now with Godwin assumedly back in the lineup, and Gronkowski and AB, and it's just going to be, you start Tom Brady, and you bet the over here.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going over. Not by quite as bullish as you are on this whole thing, but I think he's going to surpass 20 fantasy points. How about Deshaun Watson against Jacksonville, 22.5 fantasy points?
It's a high line, but I'm going to take the over here as well. I actually really like Deshaun Watson this week. Have him as my QB2 on the week.
I love it. I agree. I'm going over. I think it's going to be a big week for Deshaun Watson, who has played very well since Bill O'Brien was fired, which also, by the way, coincided with a much easier schedule.
Right.
Dalvin Cook against Detroit. Is there a line I can make this where you won't be going over, but it's 20.3? Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I write that down?
Yeah, that's a high line, but I mean, it's Dalvin Cook against the Detroit Lions run defense. I'll take the over here as well.
I am too. I struggle to think of where I would have to go under here. James Robinson against Houston, 17 fantasy points.
Fantastic matchup. I think for him to hit 17 fantasy points, he's going to have to score. And I think it's possible. Man, I want to say like I have him right underneath this. So I'll take the under, but it is like by decimal points here.
It's exactly the same way. I have him like at like 16.7, but I am going under as well. Again, I don't know what we're going to see from this Jacksonville offense here with Gardner Minshew's sideline. So we'll see. Your favorite, I think I know where you're going with this. Ezekiel Elliott against Pittsburgh, 13.9 fantasy points.
Yeah, you got to take the under here against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
I agree. DeAndre Hopkins against Miami, 16.7 fantasy points.
It's DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going to bet the over here.
As am I. These are good lines, though. These are like right? They're everything I was within 0.3 fantasy points in half PPR format. So I like kudos to the lines. Chase Claypool, Dallas, 11.9 fantasy points.
He's going to have to find the end zone to hit that over, but I do think that he finds the end zone in this one. Fantastic matchup for him. I will take the over on this one.
I will too. Antonio Brown, New Orleans, 10.4 fantasy points.
I'm pretty bullish on Antonio Brown this week. So I think that the rumors or what Bruce Arians was saying, like he might not get his full allotment of snaps or whatever. Like, yeah, I'm calling bull on that one. I think he's going to be plugged into the lineup and off and running. So I will take the over here.
So will I. I don't know whether or not Chris Godwin is really going to even be able to suit up, and if he is, whether or not he's going to be effective. So I agree. Antonio Brown's going to get a little more run than Bruce Arians is pretending, and I'm going to go over as well. Robby Anderson against the Chiefs, 13.2 fantasy points.
Tough matchup here. If this line was just a couple points lower, I'd probably take the over, but I am going to take the under here at 13.2.
I'm still going over. They're tough against the pass, but I think that there's going to be enough volume here for Anderson to go over in half PPR formats. Last one, tough. We don't know the quarterback, but TJ Hawkinson against Minnesota, 10.8 fantasy points.
I was just about to say this will change if we get news that Matthew Stafford is not cleared to play on Sunday, but for right now, I'm going to assume that he is, and if that's the case, then I've got TJ Hawkinson as a top 5 tight end this week. I will take the over.
Yeah, me too. All right, so again, as you guys know by now, I mean, it's week 9. I hope this isn't the first time you're listening to our Friday podcast. It's the morning. Stan and Kyle in the morning, which means we don't have practice reports yet. I will try to give caveats, as I always do. But first, let us start with a recap of last night's game. That is the Packers 34, the 49ers 17. Here's the deal, Yates, and I will try to express this in as respectful a way possible. You are not allowed to make Aaron Jones totally questionable, probably not going to play, then randomly going to kind of play, maybe, and then give him 40 snaps, including after the game is completely decided, continuing to roll him out there. You cannot basically sit Jerick McKinnon for 2 games or whatever for zombie legs, as Derek Brown called it on our DFS show, and then give him 42 snaps, including a meaningless touchdown when the game is over. That's just crazy talk, and I will not stand for it as a fantasy analyst. But regardless, we have to look at what happened. Jones, 20 touches, 79 yards. Aaron Rodgers throws 4 touchdown passes. Davante Adams, a complete ridiculous monster. 12 targets, 10 catches, 173 yards, and a touchdown. Look, I don't really think there's all that much to take away from those 3 guys with Jones being healthy, and he's got 10 days, so I get maybe you were sort of like, what difference does it make? Let's give him a run. He's healthy. Let's see what he can do here at the end with extra time to recover. Aaron Rodgers is amazing. Davante Adams is fantastic. So you can talk about those guys. I really want to talk about MVS here.
Yeah.
4 targets, 2 catches, 53 yards, is that right? And 2 touchdowns, unless I missed it. He had the ugly drop early, Yates, which I love because we chat during the games, and you were like, oh boy, MVS, like horrible drop. We were all like, that's it. That's the last you're going to see of him. You've got Allen Lazard coming back, but he does wind up catching 2 touchdowns. Is your interest at all peaked here in MVS?
No, this is what MVS does. He comes out, he has an egregious drop that is just clearly like, it was a 3rd down play. It was a play that they needed to pick up the yardage to be able to keep the drive moving. And you could just, I love how the cameras, every single time that MVS drops a pass, it cuts immediately to Aaron Rodgers' face. And you can just see like the look of pure disappointment. Like I am never throwing to you again. Like
I think it was Heath Cummings from CBS who tweeted something like, I completely understand not giving snaps to MVS. I completely understand not targeting MVS if he does get snaps. But I refuse to accept giving snaps to MVS and targeting MVS and then getting annoyed when he drops passes.
Right.
Because you make your own bet. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is exactly what he does. He comes out and he has an egregious drop, but then he is able to break, past the defense and reel in a long touchdown because it's a beautiful throw from Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that first one, you can't get more wide open than that. So,
oh man.
I mean, this is what he does. And with Allen Lazard coming back into the lineup, this is just something where if you have MVS and you can somehow flip him and sell him for whatever you can get after a 2-touchdown performance and someone, is just box score scouting in your league, then do that because he's about to, this is what he does. He's done this before.
Yeah. No, we joked about it with Tags on the waiver wire show, I think a couple of weeks ago, where he was like, MVS, no, you can't do this. So this is going to happen a bit. Do you want to say anything about Aaron Jones or Aaron Rodgers or Davante Adams?
So you use this phrase all the time, like, this is my nightmare. And this is what that was yesterday, going in as a fantasy analyst, trying to tell people what to do with Aaron Jones, with this game, with Jerick McKinnon, everything. This was my nightmare. Like, trying to figure out where the heck do we rank Aaron Jones after the news that we have is that he is questionable, he's been limited, he has barely practiced the past 2 weeks. Oh, he comes out and gets the first 4 touches and looks explosive and looks like he's perfectly healthy. What the heck, man? Like,
right.
It was just so frustrating. So I think that moving forward, we just plug in Aaron Jones. We plug in Devonta Adams and Aaron Rodgers.
Oh my God.
Goodness. That fourth down catch that he had with the defender literally interfering with him, draped all over him. Yeah. He's ridiculous. And he's on a tear like we've never seen before. So, you just continue to fire up Davante Adams as your number 1 overall wide receiver every single week.
I agree. And going up against Davante Adams has entered into that zone of, oh no. Like, you see your opponent has Davante Adams.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh no. This
is a loss.
For San Francisco, just an ugly game all around for the team. Obviously, Jerick McKinnon gets that late score. Richie James, 13 targets, 9 catches, 184 yards, and a touchdown. I assume that Brandon Ayuk will be back, and then Deebo Samuel will be back, and Kendrick Bourne will be back. Do you have any interest in Richie James?
No, and again, this is my nightmare. Trying to project which San Francisco 49ers wide receiver was going to be the, target leader and whatever. I had a friend text me last night during the game, was like, well, I had the choice between Richie James and Trent Taylor, and I picked Trent Taylor. And I was like, I would have too. Like, looking at Richie James coming into this game too with an ankle injury. He was questionable. Everything pointed to Trent Taylor being the target. Nope, it was Richie James. And Kyle Shanahan, just from a play calling perspective, what he's able to do, Richie James could not have been more open on several of those plays. It was ridiculous. Like, no one within 20 yards of him. So, it just speaks more to the offense as a whole rather than Richie James necessarily.
Yeah, I was terrified when I looked at it because on Thursday nights I do the Betting Pros NFL podcast. So that leads me to shortly before lineups lock. So I have to very quickly digest the latest news and try to update my projections and my rankings. And I was like, I don't know even what to do with Richie James. Thankfully, it looks like I was slightly below ECR. So my bad on that, everybody. He's 68th. In ECR, I had him 69. Sorry if you trusted my rankings. I assume that for the running game, Raheem Mostert is going to be back eventually. McKinnon gets 15 touches in this game, 68 yards and a touchdown. Hasty just 5 touches, 13 yards. Why give him anyway? Is McKinnon somebody now who you feel like fantasy managers should pick up and or can rely on?
Can rely on? No. It's this backfield. This backfield is so freaking weird. And so moving forward, Raheem Mostert coming back at some point. I really don't want to invest in this backfield. JaMycal Hasty, I had him at 21 in my running back rankings this week, so I was pretty optimistic on him because of the matchup. This game just got out of hand real quick. And, and the game script moved JaMycal Hasty out of it, and that's what brought Jerick McKinnon onto the field more as the pass-catching back. So, man, this is just a backfield that you want to try to avoid if you can.
Yeah, I agree. I hate everything about it. I hate everything about it. You will never rely on this. We're moving on. Let's start looking at this weekend's games. By the way, as we are doing this, I have alerts set for various beat writers on my phone. So if you're watching our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros, and you see me kind of look down to the left, it's often because there's been a tweet. And there are some minor COVID things happening right now, like the Dolphins and the Falcons apparently have staff members who have tested positive. we're going to assume that all games are going to be played right now. And if something develops later on...
If the 49ers and Packers game happened last night, every single game is going to happen this week.
They're just caution the wind, baby. Okay, let's get to the Broncos then, visiting the Falcons. That was the reason I brought it up here, because of the Falcons. It sounds like Phillip Lindsay right now is going to play. So if so, are you starting either Melvin Gordon or Phillip Lindsay or both?
Yeah, I'm going to start both of them, but I'm adjusting my expectations. I don't have Gordon or Lindsay as a top, 15 running back or anything like that. Gordon lands at RB 19 in my rankings and Phillip Lindsay at 25 or 26 off the top of my head. So these guys are both ones that you can plug in. I'm going to lean, if I'm choosing between either of them, I'm going to lean with Gordon because of his work at the goal line. Lindsay's going to have to break away a long play like he did last week to be able to find the end zone and give you, a higher ceiling. So, but I do think that, if you're desperate for a running back and you need an option, I think Lindsay can be plugged in.
Yeah, I think so too. I think both these guys are probably, again, I'm not even going too deep into it. It's our Friday show, so I'll have everything updated tomorrow night. Both these guys, my guess, are probably going to rank very close to each other when they're done, and both are going to be startable options. Good matchup against Atlanta. I'm not expecting, they're going to need points, but my expectation that both guys are going to get a ton of work and that both are going to be startable. How about the wide receivers here? It sounds like Tim Patrick is trending in the right direction to play in this game. Do you have any interest in him, or do you have interest in Jerry Jeudy, and does that matter whether or not Tim Patrick plays?
Yeah, great matchup, obviously, against Atlanta and their secondary. So I think you can plug in both of them as flex options if, Tim Patrick does suit up. But if Tim Patrick does sit, then I think that you can fire up Jerry Jeudy as a low-end wide receiver 3. I actually really like him this week if Patrick sits.
So you don't like him if Patrick plays?
Not as much. I have him as a high-end flex at that point. Again, you can still start him, but not. I'm adjusting expectations if Patrick plays.
So I think I'm still going to have him as a wide receiver 3 if Patrick plays, because I'm hopeful. You and I both know Jerry Jeudy is incredibly talented. He's one of the best route runners in the game as a rookie right now. I am hopeful, even though he didn't produce overwhelmingly last week, the fact that he got the 10 targets and the fact that when you get the ball in his hands, he can do great things, is going to kind of lead them to saying, you know what, we've got to make sure he's on the field pretty much the entire game, whether it's in the slot, whether it's out of the slot. So I probably will recommend starting Jerry Jeudy regardless of Tim Patrick, but I agree that the shine is off a tiny bit if Tim Patrick plays. How about Noah Fant here? Great matchup. You're willing to go as a top 12 tight end at least?
Top 5.
Yeah, top 5 for you.
He's in that range, man. This is a fantastic matchup for opposing tight ends, and Noah Fant continues to be heavily targeted. So, yeah, I think that you can plug him in as a safe option with ridiculous upside.
Man, I thought I was bullish as 6th on my board. You are, as always, you out-bullish me. Let's go to the Falcons. You're not expecting Calvin Ridley in this game, right?
He wasn't spotted at yesterday's practice, so that's not a good sign. I think he was limited on Wednesday, so it looks like he might be, it might be worsening for him. So, yeah, I think at this point, I wouldn't be expecting him, even if he does suit up, kind of adjusting expectations where he might move down to like wide receiver 20 in my rankings. So he's not a must-start player, but again, it's Calvin Ridley. It's very hard to sit him if he does suit up. So, but at this point, yeah, I wouldn't be expecting him to play.
With a bye next week, it'd be crazy if they play him. But we have seen it, with like the Chris Carson thing that they did. Right. So you never know whether or not, but I'm not expecting him to play. You're obviously starting Julio Jones regardless. Are you starting Russell Gage if Ridley sits?
If Ridley sits, yeah, I think you can roll Gage into your lineup as a high-end flex play. And again, when I'm saying high-end flex play, what that means is outside the top 36 wide receivers. So wide receiver 1 is 1 through 12. Wide receiver 2 is 13 through 24. And then 25 through 36 for wide receiver 3. Flex play being outside that range. So, yeah, I think as a high-end flex play, you can roll in Gage into your lineup because, again, the targets have to go somewhere. And you know that, Atlanta's going to be throwing the ball. So the ball's got to go somewhere, and I think Gage is a safe floor option for you.
Yeah, right now I have him 44th on the assumption that Ridley doesn't play. He might move around a little bit, but I agree. As a flex play, for me, how about Hayden Hurst here?
Yeah, I like Hayden Hurst as a mid-range tight end 1. So I think, again, and that's kind of projecting that Calvin Ridley, I haven't fully adjusted Calvin Ridley being out. So if Ridley is out, then I think Hurst might even move up higher than that. Again, the targets have to go somewhere.
And Todd Gurley, an obvious play for you in this one, right?
Not necessarily an obvious play. I do think that you can roll him into your lineup. The Denver Broncos have actually been pretty stout against running backs. So with Gurley, over the last 3 games, he's averaged 2.55 yards per carry, but he's found the end zone at a ridiculous rate. So, and last week we saw the snap percentages actually start to dip down significantly for Todd Gurley and move up significantly for Brian Hill. And you're trying to figure out, okay, was that just a one-time thing, or is that now an indication of what it's going to be moving forward? So Gurley moves down in my rankings to, he's at running back 15 for me, so he's still a solid start because I am betting on him finding the end zone, but I do think that we have to be a little bit more concerned about Brian Hill starting to factor in now.
I'm completely fine with that. By an obvious start, running back 15, to me, that's an obvious start. So to me, that's somebody who maybe you can get away from it, but given the state of the running back landscape, like if you have Todd Gurley, you're almost certainly starting him. And it sounds like you are at running back 15. Even if you're not, you know that. We're never excited about running backs once you get past the top 8. So this is somebody who you're like, oh, I'm not really expecting a crazy game. Oh, yeah, I have him slotted in as 15th, for example. Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott?
I'll play Gurley.
Todd Gurley or Antonio Gibson against the Giants?
I will play Gibson. I have Gibson pretty high in my rankings this week.
All right. We'll get there. And Matt Ryan, you starting in this one or keeping him on your bench?
He's just inside my top 12 on the week. So, yeah, you can start him. I don't think that he has like super blow-up potential in this one. Julio Jones is going to have to go off for that to happen. But he does take a slight hit if Ridley is out of the lineup, though.
Okay, cool. So, look, before we get to our next game, Yates, you and I kind of talk every once in a while about our upbringing, stuff like that, and our background and everything like that. I don't think I've ever told you this very important fact about my life, which is that I was not allowed to have sugary cereals growing up. My dad had like a crazy sweet tooth, so you wanted like a donut, you wanted a cookie, you got all up in my kitchen, okay? Somehow my mother drew an artificial line at like sugary cereal. So when we would sleep over at our friend's house and it would be like Cocoa Krispies or something like that, it would be like a holiday. We would go crazy. I passed this down to my children, okay? I don't know why. It's just a Harris tradition. No sugary cereals in the house, so they get sort of boring. So as a result, they've never really liked cereal until Magic Spoon, okay? That's only because they think it's like a treat. They think it's a sugary cereal, so they're very excited to have it. They don't understand that it's basically like the healthiest cereal, that you can have no sugar, 11 grams of protein, only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving, GMO-free, gluten-free, and keto-friendly. 4 flavors. I've mentioned it before. Blueberry, my favorite. Fruity, frosted, my son's favorite. And cocoa, my daughter's favorite. Finding anything that my children will eat that is not, sweets or something where, I feel bad about giving to them is hard. Finding breakfast for them that they will eat and that is healthy is hard. So for me, Magic Spoon cereal, which I like to eat, which they like to eat, is legitimately a game changer. Go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Just grab a variety pack. Try it out. You're going to love it. You're going to want to keep getting it. I promise. Use our code FANTASYPROS and you will get free shipping. magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Use the code FANTASYPROS for free shipping. Again, all of the flavors are great. I like the blueberry. My son likes the frosted. My daughter likes the cocoa. And frankly, we all share the fruity. So we all get a little bit of it. But regardless, it's all fantastic. So make sure you go magicspoon.com/fantasypros. Let's get to the Seahawks visiting the Bills. You are obviously starting Russell Wilson. You are obviously starting DK Metcalf. You are obviously starting Tyler Lockett with confidence. Let's assume Chris Carson is out in this game. Are you starting DeeJay Dallas? I mean, Carlos Hyde's going to be out. Are you starting DeeJay Dallas?
Yeah, if Chris Carson's out, and I'll just say this right now, obviously we're recording this Friday morning, so we don't have the news yet on Chris Carson. Apparently he is going to test his ankle in practice today to see how he's feeling. Obviously that doesn't bode well, but again, it's Chris Carson, so we have no idea. He could come out and say, yeah, I'm good to go, and he could get 20 touches in this next game. So that's a situation that we'll just need to continue to monitor. But for the purposes of arguing here, I think that DeeJay Dallas would be someone that slides in probably just inside my top 24 running backs in the week. Obviously, we saw his opportunity last week. He found the end zone a couple times. It's a running back in Russell Wilson's offense, so we need to be talking about him as a solid option this week.
Yep, I agree. Right now, I'm ranked 26th, and that's going to, assuming Carson doesn't play. And if Carson plays, you know, you're not expecting to be at full strength, but you are starting Chris Carson.
Yeah.
Plays, right?
Yep.
Okay. For the Bills, you're starting Josh Allen, you're starting Stephon Diggs. What about the running backs here? In a tough matchup with Seattle, where do you have Singletary and Moss?
I'm not a huge fan of Singletary this week because we're starting to see his snap percentages dip drastically down. And Zach Moss's start to come up. So betting on and plugging Singletary into your lineup, you're betting on him just like being super efficient with his touches, and he doesn't really have much of a ceiling. You know, he can bring us a relatively safe floor, but he needs to get a lot of touches for that to happen. So everything kind of just has to break his way in order for him to finish as a top 24 or just around the top 24 running backs. Like, I just don't see much of a ceiling here for Devin Singletary. So he's a little bit further down my rankings. I would be looking to play someone like Jonathan Taylor over Devin Singletary this week. Maybe even J.D. McKissick. And then Zach Moss, he is at 28 in my rankings. So tougher matchup here, but I do think that he has an excellent chance of finding the end zone. So I think the arrow is pointing up for Zach Moss and the arrow is pointing down for Devin Singletary.
I agree. I don't really want to start either one of them. But again, we're at a point where you do what you got to do, essentially, when you need bodies. I agree. I have Jonathan Taylor over both of them, and I don't want to start Jonathan Taylor if I can get away from it. How about John Brown, who, again, is practicing fully now this week? He saw a bunch of snaps last week. It's a great matchup. Are you willing to roll the dice with Brown? And what about Cole Beasley?
Yeah, Tags is a big fan of John Brown this week, and I have to agree. Looking at the matchup here, this is just the Seattle secondary. You start your opposing wide receivers against them. And so with John Brown, obviously didn't do much last week, but Josh Allen only threw the ball 18 times. So looking at this matchup and Russell Wilson on the other side of the ball, I expect Buffalo to have to throw the ball to keep up. And I think that it lends itself to John Brown, who is finally fully healthy, having a pretty good week here. So I have John Brown just inside my top 30 wide receivers on the week. So I think you can start him as a solid wide receiver 3 with upside.
How about Beasley?
With Cole Beasley, I have him as a flex play. I have him a little bit further down. He's at 44 in my rankings right now. So I'm not necessarily sitting here and pounding the table saying, yeah, start Cole Beasley with John Brown in the lineup. But I do think that he brings a safe floor. And in this matchup, of course, he has a chance of finding the end zone.
Bears visiting the Titans. You got a lot of offensive line issues for your Bears there, Yates. But you're still starting David Montgomery, right?
Yeah, I moved him down my rankings because of the fact that there are literally no offensive linemen in Chicago. Everyone is either on the COVID-19 list, a close contact, or injured. So I have no idea who's starting on the offensive line for Chicago, and I don't think even Matt Nagy knows at this point. So I have Montgomery at 17. But I do think that because of his workload, I think that he brings a safe enough floor that you can plug him into your lineup.
I agree. And, of course, you're starting Allen Robinson, right?
Yep.
And Jimmy Graham outside the startable wide receivers, tight ends, right?
Yeah, with Jimmy Graham, I think that, his work in between the 20s is just like, why are you continuing to put Jimmy Graham out on the field? Bad drops, just doesn't look like he's interested in attacking the ball in between the 20s. He's a role player at this point for Chicago, and the sooner that they realize that, the better off they'll be. Get Cole Kmet on the field in between the 20s, but then bring on Jimmy Graham in the red zone, and he can see those end zone targets, but that doesn't equate to anything for fantasy football.
For the Titans, of course, you're starting Derrick Henry. Of course, you're starting A.J. Brown, even if it's a tough matchup with the Bears. How about your best friend, Jonnu Smith?
I have Jonnu Smith outside my top 12 tight ends this week, and it pains me to say that. But looking at his routes run over the past few weeks, he is just not. He's being asked to stay in as a blocker a lot more, and it might be because of Taylor Lewan being out and asking, just the tight ends to stay in and compensate for that. But at this point, we have to go with what we're seeing on the field recently, and that's just that Jonnu Smith is not being utilized the correct way in this offense. So if you have a better option, then I think you can pivot away from Jonnu Smith. I wouldn't drop him. I've gotten that question a lot recently. Just like, would you drop Jonnu Smith? And I think the answer is if there is a clear, if there's a Rob Gronkowski, if there is even a Hunter Henry available on your waiver wire, then yes, I think you can drop Jonnu Smith for them. But to drop Jonnu Smith for someone like Logan Thomas, no, don't do that.
Okay, and how about Ryan Tannehill then? Are you willing to start him against the Bears?
He doesn't have as much upside in this matchup, and Tags talked about this on the Start Sit podcast, saying that it's like two giants, of efficiency clashing here, where you're looking at the Titans offense that has just been breaking. We joke about it all the time, like breaks all efficiency metrics. But then you look at the Bears defense and particularly their pass defense, and you say, well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. They break all efficiency metrics. So which one's going to come out on top here? It's a really interesting conversation. So I have Tannehill at QB 12 on the week. So I do think that you can still start him. But yeah, I don't think he has the upside to finish, QB 5 or anything like that.
Last one on the Titans here. How about Corey Davis?
Corey Davis, I actually like this week, and I'm willing to lean into the target volume and downgrade him slightly based on the matchup. But I talked about this earlier this week, saying that Corey Davis this season, the lowest that he's finished in the games that he's been healthy and played, is the wide receiver 41. And we continue to talk about Corey Davis as if he's like a wide receiver 6, wide receiver 5 in fantasy. Like There's just this perception of Corey Davis that he's not in the circle of trust yet, and we need to start talking about him in a different light. So this is a test for him. If he can come through in this matchup and produce even solid wide receiver 3 numbers, then I think it's wheels up, with Corey Davis, that we have to continue to plug him into our lineup because you can't ignore the target volume that he's had recently.
I agree. I'm starting him as well, and it feels a little dirty, but there's really no denying that he has continued to get the targets and he has continued to produce whenever he's in the lineup.
Yeah, I wanted really quick, Dan. Yeah. I wanted to double back to the Chicago Bears wide receivers too, because I do think that people are going to have questions about Darnell Mooney and Anthony Miller. And Mooney, I think you can plug in as a solid flex play in this matchup because he's continuing to see the targets. He's being targeted deep downfield, and this is a plus matchup for opposing wide receivers. So if you are in need of a wide receiver option, I think you can pick up Mooney because he's probably still on your waiver wire and plug him into your lineup. Miller is the one that I'm really, really interested to watch this week. Was his usage last week a fluke? So I think that you should pick up Anthony Miller going into this weekend. Did a YouTube video for our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros talking about stash players going into this weekend. And I mentioned Anthony Miller because if his usage last week wasn't a fluke, if we saw a change in the offensive play calling philosophy after they got embarrassed on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago, then Anthony Miller has the talent to be a consistent wide receiver 3 for your lineup. So he's available on a lot of waiver wires. Go pick him up just in case last week wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, that's an error on me because I didn't talk about the low end guys. I agree with Anthony Miller. I'm really hopeful. We were all really excited about Anthony Miller coming into the season. Hopefully, all the extra usage was that. I lean towards tags right now where I think it might have been because the game planned without Allen Robinson, at least a little bit coming in, and so that's why Miller got extra work. Mooney, I have at 49. So I agree, like right on the border of being a flex play for me. So my bad. Good call. Well done. Let's go to the Ravens visiting the Colts here. Mark Ingram seems likely to miss the game. Are you starting either J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards or both?
Yeah, I think you can start both of them. I have J.K. Dobbins pretty high in my rankings right now, and it speaks more to the running back landscape than it does to my confidence in J.K. Dobbins, but I have him at 14 right now, Dan, because you're looking at the workload that he's going to see. And yes, it's a tough matchup. Everything on paper says to try to avoid J.K. Dobbins if you can, but last week was a tough matchup, and he produced for you. So I think you can start Dobbins with confidence this week. And then Gus Edwards, I have a little bit lower, but yet he's the goal line back in this offense. We saw him get that goal line opportunity last week. He cashed in, and I think that he does have some upside in this matchup too. So Gus Edwards, I have at 23, and J.K. Dobbins at 14. By Sunday, Dobbins will probably move down just a couple spots, and then Edwards up a couple spots, where they're probably going to be right around the same range.
Yeah, my early rankings are Dobbins 21 and Edwards 32, so a little bit down on both. It's a tough matchup, of course, when the Colts are healthy as they are right now, but that's going to move around a little bit. You can start both of them. I'm going to have Dobbins ranked as an RB2, and I'm probably going to have Gus Edwards ranked as a flex play, but both of them are going to be able to be started this week. Squeaky wheel game here for Marquise Brown, you think?
I'm not willing to buy into that necessarily. I think that, again, he's kind of this, I've said it all season long, that he is a wide receiver 3 that comes with a wide range of outcomes. He can either give you a boom, potential, or a boom performance, and can absolutely go off, or it can give you one target for, one catch. Like, it's a wide range of outcomes, a very, very tough matchup for opposing wide receivers. I have Marquise Brown. I'm going to play it a little bit safe here with Marquise Brown. I have him as a wide receiver 3 in my rankings this week.
Okay, and you're starting Mark Andrews and you're starting Lamar Jackson, even if you don't like them as much as you might otherwise like them, right?
Not necessarily. Mark Andrews, I have at tight end 10 on the week.
Wow. Okay.
From what we've seen,
I get it.
Yeah, from what we've seen from him this year, and particularly not necessarily from him, but from Lamar Jackson as a passer, and this matchup, a very, very, very tough matchup for opposing tight ends. I don't think that we can feel confident plugging Mark Andrews into our lineup as a top 5 option this week. Lamar Jackson, I have outside my top 12 quarterbacks on the week, Dan. It feels crazy to say, and I hate saying it, but yet because of what we've seen from him with turning the ball over, if this was a better matchup, then absolutely fire up Lamar Jackson as a top 5 option. But the Colts pass defense is no joke, and they have been shutting down opposing quarterbacks, and we saw what Lamar Jackson looked like last week against a stout Steelers defense that actually is more susceptible to opposing wide receivers and quarterbacks than Indianapolis from a fantasy perspective. So I'm tempering expectations here with Lamar Jackson. He's the QB 14 on the entire season. So he is at QB 14 in my rankings this week.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue too much with it, but I still have him 9th. Like, I can't push him down.
Yeah, but it's not like, and the difference between 9 and 14, like, it really isn't all that much. But it's not like you're sitting here saying, yeah, continue to plug in Lamar Jackson as a top 5 option in your lineup.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Start anyone on the Colts.
Not if I can avoid it. I think.
Who's the closest? Is it Taylor?
I have Wilkins like 1 or 2 spots above Taylor. Okay. Outside of that, man, I mean, I have Trey Burton outside my top 15 tight ends. I have no wide recievers on the Colts inside my top 45 or even 50. I mean, the running backs are all kind of grouped together in the 30s. So, man, if I can avoid it, I'm sitting all of them.
I'm doing the best I can to avoid it as well. I could see a scenario where I have to start a Colts running back, but man, I really don't want him. Let's get to the Panthers visiting the Chiefs. Thoughts on Clyde Edwards, Allaire here, and Le'Veon Bell? How are you ranking these guys?
I mean, from a logic and projection standpoint, we should be plugging in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell into our lineup. Looking at the matchup here against the Carolina Panthers run defense, like the likelihood of where the touchdowns are going to go in this one, looking at the pass defense, actually being pretty good here in Carolina. I don't think they're going to be able to slow down Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and all that, but yet everything from a paper perspective, or on paper, says, hey, let's plug in Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a top 12 option this week, and Le'Veon Bell is a top 24. I have it baked in, the risk there. So both of them fall a little bit further down, but I do think that in this matchup, you should be starting both of them if you can.
I agree. You're, of course, starting Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. Are you starting any other Chiefs wide receiver?
No, not if Sammy Watkins. I don't think is going to play in this one, so I'm avoiding him. If he did play, I think even coming off the injury, I probably wouldn't be looking his way.
CMC is back. You're firing him up, of course. Are you starting both Robby Anderson and DJ Moore?
I'm starting Robby Anderson. I have him a little bit further down this week. I have Robby Anderson at 15. Normally, I've been having him in my top 12. And then I have DJ Moore at 30 this week. Not super crazy about him based on what we saw last week. And anytime that he has, popped off, it's been because he broke away a big play, got behind the defense, that Atlanta, or was it Atlanta, with, a broken coverage in the secondary. Yep. And then Curtis Samuel is actually out-targeting him. So I think DJ Moore, in a tough matchup here against the Chiefs' pass defense, I'm a little bit more hesitant on Moore.
Are you willing to start Curtis Samuel?
I have Samuel at 43, just above Cole Beasley this week. So I think that you can get away with starting Curtis Samuel. But again, I'm not overreacting to what I saw last week.
All right, let's go to the Lions visiting the Vikings. We have the questions with Matthew Stafford. We won't know, I guess, until Sunday morning whether or not he's been cleared. So does Stafford playing matter to you whether or not you start Marvin Jones this week?
It does. I think if you have Chase Daniel as the starting quarterback here in Detroit, then I don't know if you're going to see them push the ball deep downfield as much, which is where Jones has been effective throughout his career. So he can find the end zone and he can save, his fantasy performance and outing, but I think it would downgrade him to probably, I have him as a top 20 wide receiver right now with the assumption that Stafford plays. He'd probably move down to around that same range as the DJ Moore if Chase Daniel is a starting quarterback.
And how about Hockenson? Are you starting him regardless of Stafford, or is he dependent on
Yeah, I'm going to start him regardless. I mean, the upside takes a hit, right? If Stafford plays in this matchup, I have Hockenson as a top 5 option. But yet, if Chase Daniel is a starting quarterback, he probably would move down to around the same range, like maybe same range as Hayden Hurst, probably in that like low end tight end 1 conversation.
And how about DeAndre Swift? Is he good to go in this one?
I mean, again, kind of all logic points to him starting and him being a solid option this week, but that's just no guarantee. So I think that I have him at 16 or 15 in my rankings. So again, you start him, but he comes with a wide range of outcomes because there's no guarantee what this coaching staff is going to do with their running backs. Again, you could see Kerryon Johnson come in and get the receiving touchdown like he did last week, and that takes away the upside from DeAndre Swift.
How many running backs do you have ranked ahead of Dalvin Cook this week?
None.
That is the correct answer. Number 1 running back. Thielen and Jefferson, both good to go. Rock solid starts in this matchup.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to have questions about Thielen and Jefferson based on what we saw last week. But again, how many times are Minnesota going to be able to throw the ball? Only 18 times. So even though I do expect, or 14 times or whatever they did, even expecting Dalvin Cook to have a big game, I'm not projecting him to go off for 4 touchdowns yet again this one. So if that's the case, then you're projecting around 28, 30 pass attempts for Minnesota, and that's enough for Thielen and Jefferson to each return solid. I mean, I have Jefferson at 17 and Thielen at 11, so fire them up.
Yep. Are you streaming either Kirk Cousins or your boy, Irv Smith Jr.?
Not necessarily. If I can avoid, Kirk Cousins is in that streaming conversation. I have him at 17. So again, not like jonesing to plug him into my lineup, but yet he's in the conversation. And then Irv Smith falls outside my top 18 tight ends. I need to see more from this offense consistently as far as pass volume, because you know the targets are going to go to Thielen and Jefferson first, and then Irv Smith will be the third target. And I need to see more consistently as far as the overall pass volume before I say, yeah, let's continue to plug in Irv Smith.
Giants visiting Washington. Who is your favorite Giants wide receiver in this game?
None of them. It would be Sterling Shepard because I think he brings a safe floor. Darius Slayton, of course, comes with a boom potential, but he also has the potential to be missed on those deep throws several times like he was last week. So it's actually crazy. You wouldn't think about this, but Washington is actually the most difficult matchup from a fantasy points allowed for opposing wide receivers. That's just not what you would expect, but this defense is no joke, and they've been playing really, really well. So against the Giants offense here, I am just not super excited about either one of them.
I have Darius Slayton 1 spot ahead of Sterling Shepard, and they're both low-end wide receiver 3s for me. Again, you're in the landscape where it's just dangerous, and they are getting targets, and Slayton could have had a monstrous game against the Bucs, again, had Daniel Jones looked up ever or had time to throw the ball. So I'm willing to start both of them, and they're right in the same range, but both as low-end wide receiver 3s. I know Devonta Freeman returned to practice a little bit. I'm not expecting him to play regardless. I mean, if he does, do you want to start him? If he doesn't, do you want to start Wayne Gallman or just avoid?
I actually am expecting him to play, so I, of course, could be wrong, and I'll adjust if we get news on seeing the practice reports today and then news on Sunday morning. But I'm expecting him to play. I have him at 27 right now in my running back rankings. I think if he does play and he practices in full today, then I think that, I think you can plug him in based on the running back landscape as a low-end running back, too. I think he's just going to see too much volume.
I think I'm going to just avoid this entire situation. I don't want a Giants running back, and I'll have tags yell at me again when I basically have the Giants running backs ranked too low. I need help, Yates, because I have Evan Ingram ranked as a top 10 option this week, and I need you to explain to me why I'm insane.
I have Evan Ingram at 12, and I have him ranked above Jonnu Smith, and I just evaporated off the face of the earth.
All right, fantastic. We're moving on then. Washington, usual deal. Start Terry McLaurin, start Antonio Gibson, and bench everybody else.
Yeah, I think McLaurin, tough matchup here against James Bradbury. I expect him to shadow him, and Bradbury's been performing extremely well this season. So I don't think he has as high of a ceiling, but you start him. And then Antonio Gibson, I have as a top 10 running back this week.
I don't have him that high, but I do think that he's a rock-solid start. I really hope that they realize what he can do when you give him 20 touches. I have him 13th right now, but it's going to probably, at worst, be a close game. They're not going to get blown out. And, so even if you cede a few touches to McKissick, even if you cede a few touches again to Peyton Barber, there should be enough work for Antonio Gibson to get it done here. So I agree. It's a great start this week. Texans visiting the Jaguars. Great spot for the Texans. They've been playing well. They didn't trade anybody, so you're starting David Johnson?
Yeah, I have him at RB10 this week.
As do I. You're starting both Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you starting Jordan Akins if he suits up like he's supposed to?
No, I think if both of these guys are healthy, then you just avoid this tight end group.
And Deshaun Watson, top 5?
I have him at 2.
I have him at 3. Wonderful. For the Jaguars, you're still starting James Robinson despite all the uncertainty, of course, at quarterback, where it sounds like Luton is going to be the starter. Are you starting any other Jaguar in this game?
I think you can plug in DJ Chark, but again, adjusting expectations. I scouted Luton coming out of college, wasn't super impressed with what I saw, so not expecting great things from this offense. Excuse me. So I think he gets a downgrade, but if you're going to bet on anyone, I think that you should bet on DJ Chark being the one that Luton feeds, but is nothing more than a low-end wide receiver too.
Right now I have Chark the highest, of course, and the only one worth starting, and he's a 29 for me. I'm just trying to be cautious. Although as somebody who's in a 2-quarterback league that hoards QBs and had Gardner Minshew, I really need Luton to just step up this week. So let's hope so, and let's hope it goes to DJ Chark. Raiders visiting the Chargers. What Raiders wide receiver are you willing to start in this game, if any?
Henry Ruggs, but I have him as a high-end wide receiver 4. So not crazy about him as a flex play, but I think that he came very, very close to finding the end zone last week. I mean, he was like a fraction of an inch away from finding from being credited with that touchdown. So I think, and again, it was a very, very weird game with the weather there. So I don't want to take away a ton of Henry Ruggs's usage last week. I think that if you're going to bet on any Vegas wide receiver, it should be Henry Ruggs because he always has the potential to break away a long play. And the Chargers have actually been kind of susceptible to opposing wide receivers. They're not as locked down of a secondary as we have this perception of them being. So I want to see them utilize Henry Ruggs differently. Right at Alabama, we saw him be utilized in the short passing game, and they'll allow him to create after the catch. They're targeting him deep downfield way more than I'd like to see. So I think until that, I think Henry Ruggs has a bright future in the NFL, but for right now, he's just a wide receiver 4 in my opinion.
I have him as a wide receiver 4 as well. How about Aguilar though? Are you off him now?
Yeah, I don't think you can trust him after what we saw last week. Again, I don't want to take away a ton from the usage last week in a weird weather game and everything like that, but yet at the same time, I think that Aguilar is just a dart throw flex play.
Okay, and you are all good with Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller here, correct?
Yeah, completely. Josh Jacobs just simply going to see too much work to ignore. I have him as a top, 7 option, and then Darren Waller, top 3.
Are you willing to stream Derek Carr here?
He's actually in that conversation for me. I have him at 13. So, I mean, personally, based on my rankings, if I were faced with the decision of Derek Carr and Lamar Jackson, that'd actually be a really, really difficult decision for me to make. It might switch by the time we get to lineups locking on Sunday, but right now I'd probably be playing Derek Carr.
You would need some intestinal fortitude to make that
100%.
decision. I have Carr at 14, though. I agree with you. He's right on the border line for there. I just had Jackson a little bit higher. For the Chargers, you're obviously starting Justin Herbert and Justin Jackson. Are you trusting now that this is the guy? You can go ahead and roll him out?
So really quick, before we get to Jackson, where do you have Herbert?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Where do you have Herbert?
I have Herbert. Give me a second to pull up my rankings. I have Herbert 6th.
I have him at 3 this week.
There it is. That's what I love. Take my bold ranking and throw it out the window and make it good. Okay,
yeah.
So you are starting Justin Herbert over Deshaun Watson? No, you have Watson 2.
I have Watson 2, yep.
You're starting Justin Herbert over Russell Wilson?
I think I have Wilson 1. It's loading.
So
I have Wilson 1.
So you're starting Justin Herbert over Patrick Mahomes?
Yes.
And you're starting him over Kyler Murray?
Yes, but again, they're top 6 options.
No, it's a very, very important decision. I like it. Yeah, look, he's gonna have a great game in this one. I do have Patrick Mahomes higher than him, I admit, in my rankings, but he's 6th, so he's a fantastic start. Are you willing? Now my question, Yates, are you willing to start Justin Jackson here? Are you trusting that this is what it's going to be? You can run all over the Raiders.
Yeah, this is a matchup where you plug in Justin Jackson. Still seeing the majority of the touches in this backfield. You're starting to see Tremaine Pope be more of a factor than we anticipated. I made the joke earlier this week saying that in the question between Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly, the answer was Tremaine Pope. So I think you're starting to see him be more involved. Joshua Kelly, I mean, he's way down my rankings this week. I'm not willing to go near him.
Yeah, I took the L on Joshua Kelly last week. Sorry. Tags really had a great time just killing me on a couple of calls that we disagreed on. He was right. I was wrong. It's going to happen. Keenan Allen, of course. How about Mike Williams here? Are you willing to start him?
Yeah. Again, all, projections point to Mike Williams having a fantastic game in this one. He's done this, though, where he's had a great game and then he's put up a dud the next week, and then he'll put up a great game in the games that we sit him, and then when we start him, then he puts up a dud performance. So, man, I'm not super excited about Mike Williams, but yet at the same time, the projections say to start him. So I've got him as a high end. I've got him at 29 in my rankings, in my wide receiver rankings. But he does come with ridiculous upside, but does come with a low floor too.
How about Hunter Henry here?
Henry, yeah, is a solid start. He hasn't given you a huge blow-up performance this season, but yet he's been super steady. So I have him at 7.
You're pretty much starting everyone for the Steelers as they visit the Cowboys here, but give me the numbers exactly on the wide receivers here in this game.
Yeah, you start your wide receivers here. I have Deontay Johnson at 20, I have Claypool at 23, and I have Juju Smith-Schuster at 27.
I can't argue with any of that. How about James Conner? We've been talking about how crazy some of our rankings are. How high do you have James Conner this week?
I have James Conner at 6.
Okay. Finally, I have him at 5. I'm totally bolder than you. And Roethlisberger and Eric Ebron, are you willing to stream either or both?
Oh, absolutely. If I have all 3 wide receivers in my top 30, then you better be looking at Ben Roethlisberger. I have him at 8, and then I have Eric Ebron at 9. Yeah, I have him at 9.
Okay, very good. For the Cowboys, still not sure, unless I missed it, who's starting at quarterback, Cooper Rush or Garrett Gilbert? I don't really know if it matters. Are you starting any Cowboys wide receiver in this game?
Not if I can avoid it. Where do you have Amari Cooper? We were talking about this earlier this week.
Yeah, I have Amari Cooper right now at 30. Where do you have him?
I have him at 42.
Yeah, I have no confidence that he's going to end up at 30. Just to be clear, this is sort of when I do my early rankings, especially, I hate to say it, when I'm not on the Wednesday start sit show, like I put them together on Wednesday and during the day and stuff like that. And my initial projections had Cooper at 30, but it's something where, man, you are going to want to check back. On Saturday, I will post my rankings because I could see that moving down significantly. I don't know what's going to happen in this. I don't know what we're going to expect from these quarterbacks at this point.
Yeah, so, I mean, and for context, too, I have Dallas wide receivers at 42, Gallup at 46, and then Lamb at 47. So, all of them are just in this same range because it's like, who the heck's going to receive the target share? If it was Ben DiNucci again, I think I would be a little bit more optimistic on Michael Gallup because that's where he locked onto. But this offense could not move the ball last week outside of trick plays. And if that's the case, that ball's not going to Amari Cooper. He's going to be the decoy on the trick play. So, man, this is just an offense that you want to avoid if you can.
Cooper is the only one who I have even in remotely startable consideration, to be clear. Everybody else off the radar entirely. What about Zeke? What are you doing with Zeke this week? I'm
sitting him if I can. I went out on a limb last week and said that I had him at 19 in my running back rankings. That paid off. He finishes the RB 32 just based on no scoring upside. Absolutely zero scoring upside in this offense with the way they're on their 4th string quarterback right now. Like we can't be confident. And Zeke doesn't look the same with the offensive line in shambles too. So I have Zeke at 22.
Yeah. So that's still a guy who, to be clear, most people are going to wind up starting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Ezekiel Elliott.
Correct.
Based on the draft equity that you have in Ezekiel Elliott, you probably don't have better options on your roster. Yeah. So you're probably going to be forced into starting Zeke. So I think he can give you a safe floor based on his volume, but I mean, no upside whatsoever.
He'll probably get 20 touches, and a running back that's going to get 20 touches, especially one with Zeke's talent and a decent offensive line that's getting healthier. You're probably starting each week. It feels gross. It's in the this feels gross, but I have to do it. So that's where you are. I'm right there with you completely. Dolphins visiting the Cardinals. You are starting Chase Edmonds in this matchup, correct?
Yeah. I have him at RB7.
Yeah, I'm at 8 as well. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, of course, Kyler Murray. How about Christian Kirk in this one?
I'm looking to avoid Christian Kirk if I can. He's kind of in that same range of a Cole Beasley, those kind of players where I'm not necessarily sitting here super excited to start Christian Kirk, but yet I think that he'll draw coverage from Xavier Howard this week, which isn't a great matchup. And Christian Kirk's been producing based on touchdown volume, so I just don't think that he has as great of a chance to score in this one. I'm going to look to sit Christian Kirk if I can. If not, I'm adjusting expectations and kind of viewing him as a low-end wide receiver 3.
Myles Gaskin is on IR. We're expecting Matt Breida to be out. Are you starting Jordan Howard in this game?
Again, not if I can avoid it, but I don't know if you can. Jordan Howard probably, still available on waivers. So if you are struggling with running back depth and you just need an option, I think you can pick up Jordan Howard. Again, he looks like he's going to be the main ball carrier. It's going to be Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird, and Savon Ahmed in this backfield this week. So, man, I just think that Jordan Howard, he should see 15 touches. They're going to want to lean on the run game with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. So take some pressure off of him, and I think that Jordan Howard can be a volume play, but I have him outside my top 24 running backs.
I don't know where Jordan Howard's going to end up, but the answer to what should you do with Dolphins running back situation is no.
Well, it's so frustrating though, because we've said that. How many backfields have we said that about? Just completely avoid them. At some point, we have to say you have to play someone.
I know, but I think this is legitimately going to be one of these where it's like, no, I'm not. Jordan Howard's the guy you're going to want to start, and I can't go with a guy who's legitimately been inactive, as you aptly put it early on, with badness, as a guy who I'm like, yeah, I gotta go. I don't know. We'll see where he ends up. But right now, I basically forced myself to rank him at a point where fantasy managers who are looking at my rankings would be like, okay, I've got to start. Anybody else.
Would you play Jordan Howard or either of the Colts running backs?
Yeah, I'd start either of the Colts running backs right now over Jordan Howard.
Okay.
Yeah. It's disgusting. And I don't want to start either one of those guys. Look, I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna, see where I can go. But right now, yes, I'll probably move Howard up. But right now, yeah, give me either of those guys, neither of whom I want to start over Jordan Howard. It's gross. I'm sorry. Let's go. Anybody else, by the way, on the Dolphins?
No, when you're looking at the way that Tua, again, what we saw from him at Alabama, as a Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network just summed it up perfectly with Tua. Like, he's an elite car dealer, right? Where he just disperses the cars, the passes here, gets the ball out quick, and he just distributes and evenly. And so I think that looking at his target distribution last week, DeVante Parker, one target, was able to reel it in for a touchdown. And granted, the game script got out of hand super quick, so Tua wasn't needed much. But with the way that he spread the ball around, I don't think we can be confident in starting any of these guys.
I'm not either. Where do you have? The highest one I'm sure is Parker. Where do you have him ranked?
So it's crazy because I look at it and I say I don't want to start DeVante Parker, but then I have him at 36. So he's a low-end wide receiver 3, which is a huge drop-off from where I had him earlier on in the season. But, I still think that you can plug him into your lineup, but you're hoping that he finds the end zone.
Yeah, I'm at 35. So it's also something where we're like, God, I don't want to do this. But you may have to in that situation. But, yeah, you really got to temper your expectations for everybody on the Dolphins. Saints visiting the Bucs. You are starting Tom Brady?
Yeah. Yep, I have him at QB9 on the week, so low-end QB1, but again, with all the weapons that he's got, you start Tom Brady.
Who is your favorite running back in Tampa Bay to start this week?
I'm biting again on Leonard Fournette. We talked about it after he went off against Carolina, and then the next week, you and I did a podcast, and we were like, oh, I bit. You were like, oh, I did too. And I'm going to go back to it because I can't trust Ronald Jones. After what we saw last week, particularly with Bruce Arians, right? Bruce Arians just saying, even after a fluke fumble, really wasn't Ronald Jones' fault, but he's been looking for any excuse to bench Ronald Jones. Leonard Fournette is a better all-around running back than Ronald Jones. He's not as much of a liability out of the backfield as a receiver, so I think that that's just what they want. They want reliability. With Tom Brady now being able to lean on his receiving weapons, you just need someone who can carry the ball and isn't going to be a threat to fumble or to so drop a pass or anything like that. And I think that lends itself to Leonard Fournette. Now, when you're talking about AB on the field, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin potentially coming back, Rob Gronkowski, all this does is spreads out the defense. The defense can't load the box, so Leonard Fournette is going to have all the running room that he wants. Again, it's a tough matchup, but I still think that he is someone. Dan, where do you have Leonard Fournette in your rankings?
I have him 23rd.
I have him at 13.
Oh, my goodness.
I know.
You are a maniac. Where do you have Jones?
In the basement. Freaking basement.
Okay. Okay. See, I don't have Jones, and I think that's probably the difference. I think
Yep.
if I projected Fournette, right, to have probably the amount of work that you're necessarily going to have, I don't think I think the fumble benched Jones entirely for that game, but I don't think it necessarily means Jones is completely out of the picture. I think he's going to get. I mean, I have Jones 30th, so he's a guy who I could start if I absolutely had to, but for now, I certainly have Fournette significantly higher, but I'm not quite as bullish.
Here's how I feel about my ranking of Leonard Fournette is like those old Bugs Bunny cartoons where like he's like building a road or something like that, and he's going towards a cliff, and then he like runs out of material and he's just backing off, and then realizes that he's not standing on anything, and then he falls down. That's how I feel right now about my ranking of Leonard Fournette.
Right.
Like I'm just going out on the edge, and I have nothing there to support me. I'm the only one I think that has Leonard Fournette this high, but my goodness, I don't feel great about it. But based on what we saw last week in the snap share, I want to go in on Leonard Fournette.
All good, man. That's fine. How about the Bucs wide receivers here? We don't know if Chris Godwin's going to play, so if it affects your rankings of Mike Evans and Antonio Brown, just give that caveat. But how are you ranking the Bucs wide receivers?
Yeah, so I am willing to swing for the fences with Antonio Brown this week. In this matchup, too, again, we think of the Saints being a tough defense for opposing wide receivers, but they're actually the 9th easiest matchup for fantasy points allowed, and allowing an average of 27.8 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So there's an opportunity here for Antonio Brown to step in, even if Chris Godwin plays. I think if Chris Godwin plays, then that brings him down a little bit in my rankings, but I've got Antonio Brown right now as a low-end wide receiver 2. I have Evans pretty low because I'm willing to bet that he goes back to being borderline irrelevant with Chris Godwin coming back. And I have Godwin right now at 32. Those guys will all certainly move around by the time that Sunday comes around and we get clarity, and especially seeing if Chris Godwin practices today. But for right now, that's where I've got him. I think that Antonio Brown is a solid play. I want to swing for the fences with Antonio Brown.
Yep. No, I get it. I have him as a start as well. And Gronk is fully in the circle of trust?
Yeah. Yep. You continue to start Gronk. I think he takes the target volume hit with AB coming into the lineup, but yet at the same time, he always has a chance to find the end zone, and I think he's a safe target volume. 4-6 targets, and with an excellent chance of finding the end zone every single week, you start him.
All right, for the Saints, we're assuming Michael Thomas comes back. You may know by the time you listen to this, but we're assuming Michael Thomas comes back in this game?
Yeah, getting in limited practices this week, so I think that he's trending upwards, and I think that we can anticipate him coming back, but yet we've said that several times this season, and he is yet to return. So if he does play, I think you fire him up as a high-end wide receiver too with upside.
Yep. And if he does play, are you willing to start Emmanuel Sanders, who should be back too?
I'm not. If you're looking at this offense, especially in this matchup, then I think that you just kind of avoid Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith, and the ball is going to go to Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas.
Do you have Jared Cook projected for his customary 3 catches and touchdown?
Of course, and that lands him at tight end 11.
Yeah, I love it. Drew Brees here
in the streaming conversation, but really not looking forward to playing him. I'm sitting him if I can.
Yeah, he's outside of it for me. He's 17 for me, and you're starting Alvin Kamara, of course. Are you starting Latavius Murray in a tough matchup?
No, I'm going to sit Latavius Murray.
I think that's the first time I've heard you say that. Patriots at Jets, last game. Let's sum it up like this. It's easiest if we just do this. Who in this game from either team are you willing to start on your fantasy roster?
Cam Newton as a low-end QB1 because I think that he brings a safe floor with his rushing upside or rushing ability. Jacoby Myers as a low-end wide receiver 3 flex play based on target volume and the matchup. And Braxton Berrios because I think that Jamison Crowder is not going to play in this game, and Berrios saw 11 targets last week. That's it.
No Damian Harris here after his big game?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Damian Harris. Yeah, I have Damian Harris just inside my top 24 running backs.
So do I at 24. What about James White? Because Tags is going to tell us why aren't we ranking James White high enough? Because Tags loves
why aren't we ranking James White?
Every week
Cam
he's
Newton,
on.
That's why.
He's on What's Your Problem, Man on our recap shows. Because I'm like, why do you have James White ranked so high? He's like, because I think I'm like, but that's not the way it works in that offense anymore. But anyway, I have James White ranked in half PPR formats. 34th at running back. That's a guy who's probably going to fall when you look at your flex rankings outside of the range because you're going to want to start wide receivers there. That might be a little too bullish, by the way, on James White.
Yeah,
so
I have him at 42.
Okay. All right. he's not a guy who either one of us wants to start. So we're all good there. Okay, great. That'll be a great Monday night game. Everybody watch with me. Tweet at me. It's fun watching Jets games. I'll be rooting for them to lose because I want 0-16. One time, give me 0-16, which as a Jets fan, we deserve. All right, that is it. Reminder, we do our start-sit stuff every Sunday morning. Tags does it on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros from 11 to 12. Yates does it, youtube.com/fantasypros, 12 to 1. I'm on Instagram @fantasypros from 10 to 11. Ask all the questions you want. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We will talk to you on Sunday.
Thank you for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments section below. And while you're there, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.